Welcome back, y'all, and happy Friday. In case you missed it last night, our Lady Vols pulled off a huge victory over UConn. That's a longtime rival of our Vols, especially back with Pat Summitt. This is the first time that we beat them since 2007, and that was with Coach Summitt. And this is really big because it's Coach Caldwell's first top 5 win, but I think it's also big because we've been in some close games with really good teams like Oklahoma, South Carolina, all the way down to the wire, but we just could not find a way to win. We finally got over that hump, so I would not be surprised if our Lady Vols are going to be a problem coming up in this tournament. I actually might put a little money on them to win the whole doggone thing now that we got that little bit of confidence. So that's huge for us. I don't know if I can say that the rivalry is necessarily restored, but is one step closer to it. But today's video is going to be about revenue sharing. It's going to be about NIL because the pay-for-play stuff is pretty much going away. Whole lot of information right here that I got from Ross Dellinger's article over there with Yahoo Sports, and I will link that down in the description below. I'm going to do my best to break this thing down as simply as possible for everybody and tell you what it means for Tennessee. Please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, y'all, let's take a look at this new revenue sharing model. For those of y'all that don't know what's been going on, the NCAA has been fighting 3 lawsuits alleging that they violated antitrust laws when they weren't allowing student athletes to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. You can't do that in this country. It's a cut and dry case. The NCAA knows that, so they're ready to settle. And it sounds like that final settlement hearing will be on April the 7th. So we are expecting rev sharing to start in 2025 with a cap limit of $20.5 million. Now, that number will go up, I think, every year or every few years, whatever. And that money does have to be split up amongst all sports at each institution. Now, where things get interesting at, y'all, is most schools are expected to spend 90% of that money on football and basketball. Now, from where I'm sitting at, that does make the most sense because football and basketball really fund every other sport. It's, those are the only 2 sports that make money at most institutions. Even at Tennessee, where we, coming off of a World Series last season, I think that the baseball team lost money. So that just kind of, I think, goes to show you how much football and basketball are making all the money. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, though, behind the scenes with Title IX. I kind of feel like things are already worked out just because everywhere that I've looked, this is what they're saying. It's going to be 90% goes to football and basketball. As far as how that will look for the payments for these players, football is expected to get $13 to $16 million. And we know that the roster limit has gone up to 105. The walk-on stuff, that's gone away. But really, teams are probably only going to hold about 90 players. And it might get to even less than that just to make sure the players can get more money. That's going to be another interesting part of all of this. But we're talking about an average of $144,000 to $177,000 per player if everything's done evenly. Obviously, it won't be. Something that I have also heard is that the freshmen might have like a set number and it'll go up the longer that you're with the school. If I'm, somebody at Tennessee, I'll say, hey, look, you're going to get a bonus for staying and for not transferring out. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this to make these numbers work in your favor. Now, for the basketball team, we're talking about $2 to $4 million, and they do have a roster limit still of 15 players, but no one really holds that many players. It's typically about 12 on a roster. So we're talking about $166,000 to $333,000 per player. Again, if it's split up evenly just within that team. And both of those numbers for basketball and baseball, that's probably about the average for Power 4 players with NIL. So those numbers to me look good. Again, I think that there's a lot of positive things that can come from this if you play it right. Next, let's talk about NIL because the pay-for-play stuff, which is what NIL has been in college sports, that's going away. It's going to be a cap on it. And the first part of this is very interesting to me. It's actually pretty shocking that there is expected to be an antitrust exemption for the NCAA or for college sports in general. What that means is they can put a cap on NIL. Now, there's some levels to this that we're going to kind of work ourselves through. On the first one, okay, they're saying players in-house NIL is based on market value. So number one, in-house would be like Aspire Sports. It's a donor, it's a booster, somebody that's directly involved with an institution. Those, that type of NIL money will be the most scrutinized from what I read. Now, where I'm a little bit confused at is, does that mean that the out-of-house NIL is still unlimited, or are they putting a cap on that too? With the antitrust, they could probably do that. But from what I've read, it just kind of feels like it's going to be more about the in-house. Now, whenever I'm talking about out-of-house, I'm talking about, hey, Coke really likes you. You've got a, really good following. You've got a good brand that you've already built up for yourself. And they want to give you a real brand deal that's not tied to the school or the institution or Spire Sports or any of that type of stuff. It's not just pay for play. It's actually, you getting what you're worth. So maybe everything will end up balancing out. And as we go through this, y'all will understand what I'm talking about. So the last portion right here is that there will be a new enforcement group coming, And that's the part that I was just, kind of talking about right there. They are going to kind of go through all this stuff and say, hey, what's fair, what's not fair. And they are expected to actually enforce several rules, and tampering will be one of them. All right, y'all, let's talk about this new enforcement group. It was put together by 2 representatives from each of the Power 4 conferences and some representatives from the Pac-12. We'll take a look at who those representatives were on the upcoming slide. Now, that's not the enforcement group, that's just to put it together. But the actual enforcement group will have a cap management system that's going to be handled by LBI. They have the software that the NBA uses for their cap management, for their salary management, all that type of stuff. So I like that. I like the idea of going to the, pros to figure out how to get this stuff done correctly now that this is basically amateur sports. Next, there will be an NIL clearinghouse that's going to be handled by Deloitte. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but they're basically going to be in charge of monitoring the market value outside of the schools. And we will also have an investigation and infractions unit that will be one leader with a small group of helpers. Their biggest thing is to move faster than the NCAA did, which won't be hard to do because the NCAA moved slow on everything. But they've also talked about tampering. At least I've seen that in every article pretty much that I've read. So tampering will be gone, and they will be enforcing, whatever other rules will come after what we already know to be implemented coming up here very, very shortly. But I have some questions about the NIL clearinghouse because how are you going to actually determine what the market value is? Like, what's your baseline? Are you going off of 2024, is it 2023, or is it going to be the representatives from these conferences coming together and saying, hey, look, this is, what the market value is going to be at, each individual spot, based off of the star rankings and things like that, which that's another portion of it. Who's to say what the actual star ranking is for these players? Because, On3 and 24/7 Sports, ESPN, and Rivals, they all have different rankings. So the 5-star, 4-star stuff is not going to be consistent. So I have a lot of questions about how they're going to be able to get this thing done. Is it going to be a situation where, for the first year, you can't really enforce too much and you need to kind of like create that baseline over the course of 2025? I don't know, but those questions, I can't wait to get those questions answered. Hopefully after April the 7th, once we can get some more information on this stuff. And these are the representatives that we talked about on the previous slide that made this enforcement group. So from the Big Ten, of course, we have Ohio State, and they have Ross Bjork representing them. Washington's rep is not named. From the ACC, we have Clemson's Graham Neff. There's a representative from Georgia Tech. The SEC has Texas A&M's Trev Alberts, and they have a representative from Kentucky. Now, I'm very disappointed in Tennessee for not having some sort of a representative involved in this. With everything changes, you definitely want to have your hands, in on this. Like, you want to be involved so that things go the way that you want it to go. You really can't complain too much if you're not, involved in setting this type of stuff up. So I'm disappointed with Tennessee for that. But hopefully everything will work out for us. From the Big 12, we have Arizona and Cincinnati. And from the Pac-12, we don't know who the representatives are, but it's probably coming from either one of those 2 Pac-12 or Pac-2 schools. All right, y'all, key points from what we talked about today. Number 1, pay for play will have a cap. Notice I didn't say NIL will have a cap. Now we're talking about pay for play and NIL being something separate. At least that's the way that I've read everything. If y'all do read the article, let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section. Tell me, are they saying that there's going to be a cap on NIL from the institutions, like from the Aspire Sports and all that? Or is it going to also be a cap on if you actually get a real endorsement deal? So I think, again, that it's just going to be, hey, you can pay the players a little bit more in-house, but if you've built a really big brand name for yourself and if you're very marketable, and if a Coca-Cola or somebody wants to offer you $2 million to do an ad read or, whatever, then you can still profit as much as possible off your name, image, and likeness. If they do it that way, I think that that is perfect. I think that that's beautiful. So with all that being said, I think that the real agents will be here to stay. Something else that I read as I'm, going through all these articles and stuff is that the institutions and stuff are trying to get rid of all the agents in college sports, which I can understand it if it's kind of, like a uncle agent or like a family member agent, somebody that's not a real agent, that could be messing those kids up or just asking for outlandish stuff. I can see that being a positive if that is, kind of like lessen some. But real agents might be, more important at this point because now players want to go out and get some real deals. And you can only really do that if you have a good agent and just unless you have a crazy, crazy popular name. So I think that that's very positive moving forward for all of sports. Next is tampering will be enforced. So no more tampering. That's going to mean several things, I think, especially if you look at this upcoming spring window, which will be the last window that you can do some tampering. I would expect for this window to be absolutely nuts. I think it's going to go crazy, and hopefully Tennessee does some tampering because we need a few players here and there. But people are going to try to wear this stuff out before the new rules take place. We saw what the Buckeyes did. Obviously, they had a representative, that helped put together all of these new rules and stuff. So they knew that all these rule changes were coming, and they said, "Hey, look, we're going to go all in before these rules change, $20+ million." And I think that that's a major part of the reason that Ryan Day was on the hot seat, because if you can't get it done with all the money, with all the resources that we just put into this, then you need to go. But I think that that's going to make for a very, very crazy upcoming spring window. And I'm just curious what's going to happen with the transfer portal. I haven't seen a whole lot with that. Hopefully, they can maybe put some rules and stuff in place for that, because that's what's really hurting college sports. It's not so much the NIL and players getting paid. That's not what the real issue is. It's about that transfer portal. They had to put some sort of a limit on that, and I think that that would be great if they could. But also, whenever if you come back up to the first point with the pay for play having a cap. Now, what this means to me is, number one, we have the rev sharing, and like, let's just say at a school like Tennessee, you might say the football players are going to get a base salary of $70,000, which is pretty good money, right? But then you can make that a little bit sweeter within your NIL, based off of the cap. That's something else that I'm not quite sure. How does the cap actually work? Is it going to be a cap on individual players? Is it a cap on the team? Is it a cap on the whole school, the whole institution? So that's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out as we get more information, hopefully after April the 7th. But I'm saying all that just to say, y'all, I think that what you can do is you can still use the NIL in-house to entice some of these, really high caliber players. Like, let's say, again, going back to the revenue share model that I had just brought up, if it's a $70,000 base at the University of Tennessee, you've got like a David Sanders coming in and say, okay, well, your base salary is going to be, 1.5 million, but we're going to sweeten it up by, I don't know how much you can add, but we'll just say another $250,000 within your, with your in-house NIL. And, maybe if you are, if you got a really good brand name, then you can go out and make even more money off of your name, image, and likeness. So really, the players could end up making more money if they do it the correct way. And I think that everybody should be happy. And the next key point for me is that GMs may be needed for all Power 4 schools moving forward. We've already seen some schools are, they have GMs. Tennessee doesn't have one up to this point, but they're probably going to have to hire one, just because, number one, we're talking about real, salary management, real cap management, roster management, all of that. You need a true GM at this point, because now the playing field is kind of even back up. It's not how it was in previous seasons, where you could say, look, we're just going to throw as much money as we possibly can at this 5-star caliber player, and we're going to be fine moving forward. I think that these student athletes will look more at how do they fit into the systems, how do they fit with the culture and all that type of stuff. So the coaches need to focus more on that and a lot less on the roster management. So I think that a GM is going to be necessary, and I would not be surprised to see Tennessee try to hire one here pretty soon. And Coach Heupel, I can tell you right here, right now, that P and I would love to be the GM for the football team, or really for the entire program as a whole. But in all seriousness, I think that that's going to be pretty standard moving forward. So last thing that I think is a very key point that I took away is that the allocation of the revenue sharing could hurt the Vols. And what I'm talking about here is, how do we split up that $20.5 million amongst all sports? Because Tennessee is the everything school. And I think that we've done a great job of, maybe paying a little bit above market value with the NIL for some of our baseball players, maybe some of our basketball players, and just really maybe in every single sport, we've done a good job there. I don't want to single out too many spots, but the point here is with the rev sharing, there's a big pool of money. And do we need to continue to maybe overpay from that perspective with the rev sharing? Or have we built up a good enough brand, off these past few seasons with the way that we've used our NIL, that players want to come and play here? I think that Tony V is going to be fine with the baseball team. Everybody wants to come and play for Coach Tony V at the University of Tennessee. I love what Coach Caldwell's doing, obviously, to kind of get things going. I think that the NIL did play a very major role. But now that we beat teams like UConn, and obviously we've got a really good product, I think that we will be fine there. The softball team, same thing. So hopefully things will continue to look the way that it has for Tennessee being the everything school. But I'm just curious, how do we want to split that money up? Is it really going to be that 90% that goes towards football and basketball, like we've heard most other programs will do? I think that from a sheer, like finances perspective, you've got to put the most money into your biggest money makers. And I'm pretty, I'm pretty curious to see how that's all going to play out. But those are my thoughts, man. I think that from top to bottom, this is a really good thing for all of college sports. If we could just find a way to get the tampering and stuff fixed, then yeah, I think that man, we're going right back to how college sports used to feel. So everyone should be very excited about it. But let me know how you do feel in the comment section. And as always, please do make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. And we'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.